Welcome to the Gaslit Nation Salon with Russian Mafia expert Olga Lautman on February 10th, 2025. Olga, we have a lot of questions for you. Namely, walk us through, since you are a lady of steel, pumping out Substack after Substack, documenting the horror show that's going on in Washington, D.C. with your Trump tyranny tracker and Russian disinformation monitor. Obviously, the coup we're watching playing out in real time, which authoritarian experts say, yes, this is a coup. By every standard definition of the word, it is a coup. This coup did not just happen in 2025 or 2024. It's been in the making for decades, with Trump being dependent on Russian money, by the own admission of his idiot sons, Don Jr. and Eric, through great investigative works like Craig Unger's House of Trump, House of Putin, which you are a researcher on, all the work that you've done that has put you in the crosshairs of the Kremlin. You and I took a girls' trip to Maine to get the hell out of Dodge and eat, pray, love for a girls' trip weekend when the Kremlin was coming after you in their disinformation, their propaganda, threatening you. And my mom was like, do you really want to go in the middle of nowhere with someone that the Kremlin is trying to kill? I'm like, it'll be fine. And it was. We had a great weekend, had a great time in Maine. We met up with Heather Cox Richardson, had some lobsters with her husband, her husband and buddy, fished out of a beautiful lobster grotto. It was a great replenishing time. So, yes, that was the Heather trip. All right. So, Olga, walk us through in all the chaos that we're all observing. Where do you see signs of the Kremlin? Is this happening at the behest of the Kremlin? Or is Musk operating on orders? Like USAID is gone, or it's not gone because that's illegal. That is illegal. Let's be clear. But like, where do you see the Kremlin here?
Well, the Kremlin, a lot of the things that are happening and a lot of the shutdowns, are in benefit to the Kremlin. Is the Kremlin right now directly, involved? I'm not so sure. I mean, this is a decades-long, operation, both by the Kremlin, by the far right networks, and Republicans from starting from the 70s, and it kind of converged about a decade ago, and that's where you saw a lot of overlap between more than a decade, actually in 2008. And that's where you saw the overlap between the Kremlin and Russia's operations and the Republican Party. And then you had the Tea Party, which was at the time extremist, but only a small faction. And basically, once Trump came, you saw the extremists take over. With all the actions now, like I said, a lot of them are in benefit to Russia. And you see a lot of directives, which I think are being carried out by Trump. Like, for instance, the capture task force that was seizing money from oligarchs and their properties and yachts and whatnot. That was set up after Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion. And that, I mean, literally, Pam Bondi walked in. One of her first orders was to shut that down, was to move oversight and investigations into FARA and foreign influence. They redirected the foreign influence task force. So you saw a lot of the, both joint operations, like with the FBI being completely shut down and moved elsewhere, on top of a specific, units within agencies to target Russia's operations being dismantled. And then you have, of course, USAID, which, I mean, for Russia, this is, this actually goes back to the Soviet Union. For them, this is one of the biggest gifts that could ever be done. Are they directly calling Musk and telling him, do this, do that? I don't think so. I think it's just that both have, at this point, the same objectives of overthrowing global democracy and shutting down any, anti-corruption effort and any democratic institutes who promote democracy, fund journalists, fund investigations. So you just see them having the same goals at this point.
It was so organic, wasn't it? Right? Like Musk, the richest man in the world, space exploration, expanding cars. We now recently found out, it was reported that SpaceX has some money from sanctioned Russian sources. Not a whole lot, but it's there. And Musk purchased Twitter and turned it into the largest Russian as well as Chinese disinformation platform in the world. What do you think his personal motivation? Oh, and Starlink, how he turned off Starlink when Ukraine was dependent on it in an operation in their effort to liberate Crimea. Why do you think Musk has been so aligned with the Kremlin in terms of everything?
I think that, well, it's interesting because you saw the shift in Musk, specifically around 2022. I think he was being fed a lot of Kremlin disinformation, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and he started parroting a lot of the words. For him, I think it's just, I think he's crazy. I mean, he's extremely rich. He's the richest man in the world, but rich doesn't buy you sanity and like normalcy and like happiness. And I think, due to the fact that he's absolutely nuts, he kind of put himself as some kind of a like, I don't know. He reminds me of like a Marvel comic villain who wants to take over the whole world. And being that the current world order and the norms, don't align with his objectives, you see him aligning with Russia, with China, with Iran, and other autocratic regimes who basically want the same thing: to subvert democracies, frankly, destroy democracies, and overthrow the international order, the international law, and whatnot. So I think this is where he's at. And at this point, he feels like he's not only the richest man, he bought himself a White House seat, and he feels like the most powerful man. I mean, right now, as we speak, he's like downloading and copying, stealing all, hey, call it classified intelligence, all the information on all of us. I mean, everything that is in government computers, whether it's classified or not, him and his operatives are running around and stealing it, rewriting codes, potentially inserting malware to trace, any communications. And that's it. And I think for him, he's just nuts. I don't think, that he was groomed. I think he just got to a point when you're so rich, that you just lose your mind and you don't see reality as it is.
There's this saying that my mom told me from Ukraine that a dog that's given too much fat goes mad. And that's what we're seeing here.
I mean, you see, even with Bezos, I mean, while people are figuring out and struggling and figuring out how to, get their kids, like pay for their kids' expenses and whatnot, and live paycheck to paycheck. I mean, he's sitting there like, oh, I want to go to Mars. I want to go here or there. I mean, they are completely detached from reality and from like the majority of this planet and the struggles and, the things that people go through. And Elon, on top of it, I mean, I think he also, doesn't he have like a mental disorder and he's on drugs? So, I mean, that adds to it potentially. And he's just a very volatile personality, very chaotic, very impressionable. Anyone can whisper anything into his ear and he'll automatically take it as
It's worse than what we've even seen in Russia under the Kremlin. Like they make the Kremlin look disciplined.
Kremlin is disciplined, and don't forget, I mean, there's a big difference. The Kremlin, like when Putin took power, unfortunately, Western, media and analysts like to put everything conveniently on Putin. But when Putin took power, he basically, I mean, it was a transfer of power from a shitty, corrupt, brutal system that has existed for centuries. I mean, way before the Tsars, then the Bolsheviks, and, communists. So he basically was a transfer of power in a system that is run by security services. Here, you're crashing a democracy. So, I mean, to crash a democracy, you need to be extremely, chaotic. Like Trump comes out and, I mean, 24/7 is, tweeting something, posting something, making up some lies and whatnot. You don't see this in the Kremlin. I mean, Putin comes out like very rarely, makes a statement. Every word is chosen. He doesn't add one extra vowel. Um, and the only time you see him for an extended period of time is at the end of the year when he does his Putin-thon with the million questions from, staged questions from reporters. Also, Putin and Russia, when frankly no authoritarian regime would allow a billionaire with some unvetted minions to go roaming through their systems. In Russia, you have a lot of oligarchs. I mean, they are the founders of oligarchy. There is absolutely zero chance that even their most powerful oligarch would be able to start walking through every single agency in Russia with unknown, unvetted operatives and downloading things. The FSB has control over everyone's data, plus the government agencies, but you wouldn't see this type of insanity. I mean, so in a lot of aspects, the Kremlin is definitely more disciplined, as is any other North Korean, Iranian regimes, Chinese. Like, you wouldn't see this chaos, nor, we haven't seen it, nor will we.
So Abigail writes in the chat, you have to see his technate background that goes back to his grandfather. This has been a long time coming. Yes, it's true that Elon Musk's maternal grandfather was a Nazi back in Canada who moved to South Africa out of great excitement over apartheid and was thrilled for that system of brutality and was part of a movement called Technocracy, where a bunch of technocrats were going to build an expert, top down driven, organized, planned society of technocrats, anti democratic. And it lost favor when the founder revealed the plot, basically saying that the smartest people, it was like a new form of eugenics. The smartest people are going to be in charge. And understand that the historical context of this is that the Holocaust revealed the error in that thinking of eugenics, like that the smartest people were the ones that should rule. You had some extremely smart Nazis, extremely smart Holocaust concentration camp doctors. Smarts doesn't equal morality. And so there was this whole confrontation of intellectuals of like, where does this leave us? And that was sort of a whole crisis of faith among the intellectual movement. So
in this case, they're not smart. I mean, this is
exactly
the bottom of the barrel.
exactly
In America, I mean, you have actual real smart, educated people, the not.
And so I know people are looking at like Elon was, I think, even named after a figure in the Technocracy movement or long, aspirations. But what we're seeing here, people might think, oh, they're building a planned society. This is chaos. They have assembled a cabinet of criminals, and the criminally minded are chaotic. They are undermining. They're into turf wars. We saw this with Hitler's Nazis that created little fiefdoms in the Third Reich. And the other thing that we're seeing play out with Trump's horrible regime that we saw as well with the Nazis is that the extremism became so extreme because people were anticipating what the dear leader wanted. And that accelerated the Holocaust. And that is going to accelerate the extremism under Trump. This is just a bomb of exponential chaos that's going on. What are your thoughts on that, Olga?
Well, for me to honestly, I don't think Trump is as disciplined, as that. For me, I see him honestly trying to set up a Russian style system here. And that is just basically where, he puts loyalists. I mean, this is where they align identical in every step. I actually wrote a guide to, now that we elected a dictator, what to expect. And I wrote a very detailed guide going agency by agency and action by action of what will happen. And so far it's playing through, and it was based off of the Russian system. So when Putin did take power, what he did do is very quickly clean out, Yeltsin's men and put in his own loyalists, and his loyalists were all Mafia, KGB, and other, thugs, criminals from St. Petersburg. So here you see the same thing. It's not based on experience. It's not meritocracy. It's basically putting yes men, people you trust who are criminals, into key positions in order for them to carry out your orders. So this I see overlapping here, and what's happening with, with Trump's threats for retribution. This is identical to Russia. I mean, Russia, is known for, and interestingly, what it took Putin decades to do, Trump is basically lining up to do within months. Because, for instance, Putin, in 2019, which 20 years after power, did the foreign agents law to go after NGOs, then like independent NGOs that do various things, anti-corruption, this, that. Trump is already planning to go after these NGOs now. I mean, I promise you, we're going to have a foreign agents type act, besides the fact that they're pulling the funding from, all the human rights and civil rights and democracy, anti-corruption NGOs. And basically, same thing with the retribution, weaponizing law enforcement. This is, I mean, what FSB is known for. They either arrest someone who is not loyal to the Kremlin or who has questioned the system. They either arrest them, fabricate charges from 1990, seize their assets, or they throw them out the window or kill them. So I see him replicating this type of system here. And I mean, just based off of his actions and attempts in 2017 through 2020, and then now that he has free reign, I think this is where we're going in a very quick way, like towards a Russian style system. Is it going to work here? I personally don't think so, because I do think Americans are not used to this kind of repression. And once it starts hitting people's homes, I think there's going to be a mass mobilization. Because for now, the media is talking about Elon. We're talking about Elon. We're talking about Pam Bondi, Kash Patel's retribution list, and whatnot. But until it starts hitting people where their family members are arrested, where their 401ks are tanking, where their Head Start program and daycare centers are defunded, and now they have to scramble to figure out how to go to work because they don't have childcare. I think that's when we'll see this like a mass uprising here, which in Russia it was impossible because of the fact that, one, Russians don't have the mentality to fight back, and they are like used to this type of system. I mean, this is embedded in the DNA over the centuries of being, kind of that peasant-like mentality. So I foresee more of a Ukraine scenario here, where when he crosses, the line and enough people get fed up, that people will come out and push back.
I agree with you. I've studied some of the most sadistic dictatorships in Europe, including in Romania, where after World War II, the communist regime in Romania created this horrific prison where they did these thought control experiments where it's just stuff that I don't even want to repeat, but they ran experiments on people where they would force them to become torturers of their own friends and family members and turn them into animals. Just absolute evil, sadistic, mind control torture. And this was really Moscow driving this in Romania. And it was exposed, it was ended. The police state still remained, and Romania still remained a dictatorship. But my point is, the reason why this was able to happen in the first place was because Romania was under occupation. There was World War II, and as well as the Great War, World War I, across Europe generally. These were periods of mass death and terror that really seeded the ground for dictatorships to come in, because there was so much chaos, so much dehumanization, so much trauma, mass death. It's very hard to wrap one's mind around that. The US, yes, we've had our period of genocide, authoritarianism, but in most recent history, we've had periods of optimism and progress and liberation, women's lib, civil rights movement, and too many people have been conditioned to this. And there's just so many things that make Americans hard to occupy, just like with Ukrainians. And I know this is going to sound very trite, but it's not. It is actually a very big deal. In America, the customer is always right. Like, Americans just have this entitlement of how they expect to be treated. They expect good service, they expect it. And so Americans are going to be a huge pain in the ass to any occupying force or any wannabe dictator. And you see already an example of this in Ohio. These idiot Nazis tried to march thinking, oh, our Nazis in power now, we're going to come out and have a Nazi appreciation day. These Nazis were terrorized into the back of a police van or whatever. They had to run for their lives because crowds of people in Ohio like, get out of here, Nazi scum. We're going to kill you. Like literally throwing things at them, threatening their lives. People had guns coming after these Nazis. So I think that's what America is going to be like. And I know folks I think Abigail and others were commenting in the chat here that Elon Musk and Curtis Yarvin, the broligarchs of Silicon Valley, Peter Thiel, the South African PayPal mafia, they've got their revenge against us for our role in bringing down apartheid. They want to have their planned society. They want to go to Mars. They want to create techno-fascism. Good fucking luck with that, because we also have amazing hackers that are going to bring their shit down too. So I don't think they know who they're messing with. It's going to be like a Ukraine versus Russia, like Hogan's Heroes.
15 Ukrainians opened the KGB archives, and basically, I mean, you saw the system. It was the most heartbreaking, wrenching thing to go through. And this is, I mean, and everyone is, a lot of people are still alive. But to see, a mother reporting her daughter, a father reporting his daughter, a wife reporting her husband, uncles reporting, their family members, and everyone who collaborated with the KGB, because this was the system set up, and it was meant to cause paranoia. If people are paranoid because they don't know who around them is collaborating with the regime, then they won't step out of line. And this tactic specifically is very interesting because, they basically issued a directive. Like, I think it was meant at DEI that anyone who who they see within their agency, ignoring the orders, that they must be reported immediately. So, I mean, that's another thing that I saw that was very Russian-esque. I mean, because it's still happening now. And anyone who even makes a comment about Russia's war in Ukraine immediately, whether it could be a 5-year-old kid who says something in class, the teacher will call the security services. They come and interrogate the kid, arrest the mother and father to find out what is happening, and chances are they have to either pay a penalty or sit in jail. So that tactic I saw. And like I said, as far as here, this is what they're trying to do. But I honestly I mean, we're going to have a chaotic decade or so, maybe less, of insanity and things Americans have never imagined they would see. But at the same time, I think because Americans love stability and they love to have everything in order, I mean, people get mad if your bus is late and not operating correctly, And like you said, like the smallest things set people back off. I think that people will push back, and you're going to see this pushback. And also the fact that we're a cultural national country, it's harder to control than in Russia, where it's the majority are Russians,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's also this American spirit of competitiveness that very much runs through
it might be less than a decade. I mean, I always time things out longer. It might be less. I mean, for all we know, Trump can fall out of power within a few years. I mean, I wouldn't count on elections, but I mean, the man is 80 years old and obese. So,
well, do you think this goes away if Trump goes away, given his old age? Don't you think JD Vance or Musk himself might step in as the new figurehead?
I do think they might step in, but first of all, if you look at even the polls, and I'm not a big poll person, but Musk's popularity, I mean, is in the gutter. Like, it's been decreasing. JD Vance, has as much charisma as watching paint dry on a wall. Trump was just the perfect vehicle, like this narcissist, shameless, like he has all the characteristic traits that I don't think we're going to see for decades. I mean, he had everything embodied in one, kind of package that was able to captivate this populist movement. JD Vance, I mean, he talks to the same Trump supporters and did rallies, and I mean, he laughed at his jokes. They're standing and waiting for the joke. Whereas Trump says anything. He could blurt out absolutely anything and they go crazy. So do I think it's going to completely disappear? No. But if Trump causes enough pain to the majority of Americans, Trumpism and MAGAism might finally be buried back into the fringes because it existed. He didn't create this. These are all old sentiments, things that people are still trying to like deal with from the Civil War and from civil rights movements and women's rights movements. On the right, where these far right nationalists and Nazis are unhappy with the direction of this country. So is that going to change? No. But the platform they have might if Trump causes enough pain to Americans. So if Trump with his chaos, people start missing Social Security payments, their normal everyday schedule, like I said, where they have the daycare that's funded by the government, their schools, pre-Ks, lunches, and everything, if that's disrupted, their Medicaid is disrupted, things just become chaotic. Their 401ks go down, food is expensive, then they will overwhelmingly reject this Trump and this megaism. So I do think, it's just a matter that the more pain Americans feel from the majority, from his actions, the more chances we have of megaism finally coming to an end. And then it's going to exist. I mean, Alex Jones, has been around for decades spinning conspiracies, but didn't have a mainstream platform until Trump came, down the escalator. And the same can be said about pretty much all of these, extreme propagandists.
Okay, so question in the chat, won't Trump just blame the Democrats for any problems? One giveaway for a MAGA supporter, nothing is ever their fault. And plus this MAGA cult is embedded in a disinformation tomb.
Yes, MAGA is about 30% of the country, so they'll believe whatever Trump says. I mean, if Trump tells them to all pack up and jump off the Grand Canyon, they'll all go one after another and just bye-bye. But the majority of the country the majority of the people who voted for Trump didn't vote because of his conspiracies or whatever. A lot of people even said they had to hold their nose to vote for him. They voted for economy, their own bank accounts. They voted for immigration and, feeling unsafe in their cities and towns. They voted for their own concerns. Then you had, the vote for Trump and then the vote for Joe Stein with what was happening in Gaza. So, I mean, you had so many voters who didn't vote specifically because it's a cult. You just had voters who wanted, I guess in their minds, some kind of stability because under Biden, not his fault at all. But under him, things did get expensive, as as did everything worldwide in every single country. I mean, some countries fell into recessions. We managed to stave off recession, but things did. I mean, you walk into a supermarket today, it's definitely more expensive than it was, 5 years ago. And at the same time, things did feel chaotic with a war in Europe, a war in the Middle East, and just everything felt unstable. So I think this is where the majority of the voters who voted for him, so say 72 million voted for him, probably maybe 20 million are dedicated to, mega. That's it, like ride or die Trump, and that's that. But the rest of them voted for their own, issues. And you see already a lot of buyer's remorse because you have like the Venezuelan community in Miami who voted for Trump, outraged that he revoked the TPS for Venezuelans that Trump extended for them to stay in the country until 2026. Trump basically revoked it and told them they need to get the hell out by April or be deported. That's 350,000 Venezuelans, and the community is in an uproar. These are all Republicans who vote Republican on every level. So, I mean, you're seeing already, and same thing with the Middle Eastern, the Arabic and the Muslim community, same thing. You're seeing now that Trump is claiming he's going to walk in and make Gaza into Trump Hotel. You see them now all angry. Are they going to vote for Trump again? No.
Do you think we're going to even have free and fair elections in the
I
midterms
personally
2028?
see, I've said it a lot. We'll see how it plays out, but I personally see this turns into kind of a standoff between the people in this country and Trump. And then he'll obviously order the military, and then the military is going to have to decide, do they want to kill and run over their fellow Americans, and have scenes like Tiananmen Square play out across the world and be remembered for decades and decades, of that repression? Or do they want to stand on the side of the people? I think that's how it's going to play out. But ultimately, it's not going to be Democrats. It's not going to be elections. It's going to be people who have had their life disrupted, who are seeing the danger that is happening, will come out against it. So I think, in Ukraine, it was a very similar thing when Yanukovych betrayed the country and wanted to move towards Russia and not honor the constitutional duty of moving towards the EU and integration into EU. People came out and people were very organized, and you had, Maidan form. In Maidan Square, you had the Maidan movement, and people across the whole country, every village, town, city, were out, upwards of 1 million people every single day for like 3-4 months in freezing temperatures. And then the result was Yanukovych had to flee to Russia. So, it's the people who are going to make the difference here and change anything. Everything else, when the people, like people ask me, how long do you think Trump will stay in power? Will he leave in 28? A dictator will do as much as you let them do. When we say enough is enough, this is when, he'll be out of power.